Thank you.
Well, he's in and he's out. 5-term Pennsylvania Senator Arlen Specter booted despite the president's backing, maybe because of it. The guy who knocked him out in last night's Democratic primary calls it a win for the people and a blow to the status quo. Democratic Congressman Joe Sestak joining me now. He will be facing Republican Pat Toomey in the general election. Congressman, good to have you. Congratulations.
Thanks, Neil. Good to be back with you.
Was it more your surge or Senator Specter's demise? What produced last night?
I actually think it's a little bit more about Washington, D.C. You know, I honestly believe people have lost faith and trust in Washington. I would argue, Neil, and you may disagree with me, but Massachusetts, when they voted, said pox on both your houses. We voted for a change in politics, that kind of deal-making that left a lot of bad taste in people's mouth over time, and not just a change in policy. I think they want to trust again, but they've lost all faith after being slammed into the savage recession. In the healthcare process, the process looks like it wasn't as too much deal making in it, and I think that's what occurred. And Arlen Specter, got respect for him, seemed a little bit like a poster child when he switched from one party to the other.
Do you think it was as much about voters just ticked off about all the spending?
No, I think without a question, there's a lot of correct questions about the spending. But you know, Neil, I was a supporter of the economic stimulus bill because I've likened it, which I really do think happened, that this ship of state of ours was torpedoed and we were sinking and we had to caulk the holes before more jobs were hemorrhaging out. And we slowed that. Statistics show that. I think we could have done a better job of not saying, hey, we're going to be at 8.5 unemployment rate, when in fact the modeling showed we'd be 9.5 to 10. When you're in the middle of a storm as captain of a ship, you really tell the crew, it's pretty tough out there, but here's what's going to happen. I don't think you try to sugarcoat anything, and I think there was a little too much of that.
Well, you might be right, but obviously the rearview mirror action isn't working with voters, or they're seeing all of these votes for big bailouts and rescues and TARP and all that, and they're saying, enough. You might be right, guys. You might have just dodged a bullet for the nation, but they're going to remember the time you held that gun. And do you think it hurts you?
Well, here's what I do think. I do think the government has a responsibility now for which we should be held accountable and haven't been for a period of time. That's this national debt. Look, whether we got out of the storm, but right now I think we need to look at the entire budget, not just 1/6 of the budget, to say, wait a minute here. We're going to create a new program. Let's cut another program. Now, we did finally pass the statutory pay-as-you-go, which was thrown out of the books about 8 or 9 years ago. That said, there was too many caveats in there that might let a couple of these programs slip through.
Well, would you, if you became a senator, Congressman, would your first act be to just no to any new spending?
Oh, absolutely not. Just don't say no. Look, 1 out of every 110 kids born today is born with autism. But what I did do when I moved the first money into funding in the federal government 12 years for autism, I found 2 defense programs, and as a Navy admiral, no one's going to argue too much, that were truly inefficient, ineffective in order to pay for that. It's called PAYGO, pay as you go. You do it with your checkbook at home. So you just don't stop it. You find another program to cut. Or if you want to have a tax cut. What would you cut?
What would be the first thing you'd cut?
Oh, I'll tell you a couple things I'd cut. First off, carried interest, where billions of dollars of hedge fund managers aren't taxed, except at 15% tax rate, because even though their money isn't invested to get a capital gains tax rate, it's assumed that their commission should be at that. Here's another one. Large oil companies get $80 billion in tax loopholes. They have some pretty good record profits recently. I don't know why we're doing that.
But no programs per se would be cut?
Oh, sure. I stood up and said the F-22. I've stood up and said we're building quite a few of those submarines out there. I was the guy in the Navy that said we don't need 54.
What about Social Security? What about Social Security?
No. Here's why. 22% of our seniors today live in poverty, even with Social Security. 44% would live in poverty without Social Security. Look, if you just said, let's let the top 1% pay the same tax rate they did during the Clinton years when we created 23 million jobs, while in the Bush era we created none, we'd have enough to pay for Social Security for 77 years, which you know is the actuarial rate, you know, how long it is for it. No, there's better ways than preying on our seniors. Those Social Security benefits are theirs, and we can do it in a more smart way than we're doing it. But that's a better way of doing it.
All right, I'm sorry, sir. Congratulations again. Quite the giant slayer last night. We'll be watching the race very closely. All right, well, you think you've seen spending?